Welcome to Legendary Physique. Today we're going to continue our four-part series with Jerry Brainum. So Jerry, what are the 5 myths of gaining muscle that you think really bug you when you see people doing these things in the gym?
Oh, now you see, now this is a sore point with me because this stuff just drives me crazy. All right, the first myth I think would be, and some people would disagree with this statement, is that you have to lift heavy weights all the time to gain muscle mass. And let me explain what I mean by that. It's true that you have to apply. I'm not being contradicted to what I said earlier about the overload system. In other words, to make a muscle grow, you have to constantly apply increasing resistance, and the muscle grows by having to overcome that resistance. It adapts to it by growing. In other words, the muscle hypertrophies is increased protein synthesis in the muscle, right? But the notion that unless you train heavy all the time, you won't gain muscle has been kind of disproven in recent scientific studies. A lot of older people who haven't worked out in years, they're very frail, and they have this condition called sarcopenia, which literally means loss of muscle. And, they were trying to figure out a way. These people are incapable of lifting heavy weights. If they tried to lift a heavy weight, they'd literally break their bone. So, the scientists started experimenting, and they found that if you have these people lift relatively light weights, let's say equal only to 20 to 30% of 1 rep max, and that's ridiculously lightweight, because the average used for muscle gain, in contrast, to add muscle, you want to use a weight equal to 1 rep max of 75 to 85%. So you can see how light this is, right? Now, they found if they do higher reps, like let's say 25 to 30 reps, but do them to failure, believe it or not, I know this is hard to believe, the rate of hypertrophy is equal to using a weight equal to 1 rep max of 90%. One rep max of 90% of 90% 1 rep max. It's hard to believe, but it has to do with certain anabolic signals that are sent to, that are produced in the muscle that stimulate muscle hypertrophy. As long as you kind of get these signals going, the muscle actually gets some size. Now, I'm going to quickly add, you're not going to get strong. The only way to get strong, you do have to lift heavy weights, because to get strong, you have to affect certain muscle fibers that are not affected by light weight. But, this also relates to what they call the periodization. You ever hear of periodization, where you train, let's say, light for 3 months, medium, heavy weight for 3, and then heavy. That system was developed to ease some of the stress on connective tissue and allow your body to recuperate. It's very important if you're not taking steroids or anabolic drugs that allow you to recover. You have to allow maximum recovery. Otherwise, you're not going to make any gains. So, there is a light phase to that. So, in other words, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying to not lift heavy weights. What I'm saying is alternate. You could do what I do. You might do this too. I do what they call undulating periodization, where like maybe one workout I'll do fairly heavy weight for me. I mean, I'm incapable of lifting the weights I lifted years ago. Then the next workout, I might kind of look slightly lighter weight with the same exercises, but higher reps, maybe 15 to 17 reps, something like that. The third workout, I might just do a pump work, especially if I'm low. And I do this when I'm low on energy. When I don't feel like pushing, I'll actually use light weights and do the system I just told you, where I'll do up to 30 reps, but use a weight where it starts to hurt after the 24th rep and go all the way to 30 to failure. And believe it or not, I actually make gains from those workouts. So again, the first myth is that you have to lift heavy all the time. The second one, and this relates to what I was saying earlier, to lose fat and get the nice, 6-pack that people like, you got to do loads of ab work every day, 6 days a week. You got to do that. I mean, you got to do hundreds of reps. I mean, hey, this is like so ridiculous. I still see people doing this all the time. The truth is, this goes back to the old concept of spot reducing, where if you work your waist with enough reps, it'll shrink and nothing else will, and you'll get that nice small weight. It's ridiculous. It's akin to these. I know that you have a sensitivity about these crazy things like flying saucers. It's almost in the same kind. It's absurd to think that you could reduce one area of your body and not affect anything else. And the truth is, when the body burns fat, it burns it systemically. There's no such thing as spot. They've proven this over and over and over.
But yet that myth is persistent all over the internet, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's all over. Richard, you can do a search on the internet. You'll see there's loads of articles telling you how to reduce your waist, specifically your waist. This is spot reducing. It's nonsensical. It doesn't exist. It's a waste of time, right? Now, the next one is, and this again is debatable. Some people will disagree with this, is if you do aerobics, you're going to lose a lot of muscle. Now, that again has to be qualified. If you overtrain, you will lose muscle. Anyway, you can lose muscle overtraining with weights. If you do an excessive amount of aerobics, yes, your cortisol levels will go up and you will start to lose muscle. But what I found in my studies is if you keep the length of the aerobic session to 60 minutes or less, there's no muscle loss except for one exception. If you're still doing aerobics and you've lost most of your excess body fat, and you're on a low-carb diet, and you go into the gym, carbohydrate they depleted, where your glycogen levels are next to nothing, and you do an hour of aerobics, there's a good chance that you will actually dig into some muscle tissue. In that situation, you could lose muscle. But that's the one instance where it's possible. I did an article in my newsletter explaining in detail why concurrent training, as it's called, why you're not going to really lose muscle. And since I've done that article, there's been 2 new studies basically seconding or underscoring what I wrote in my news, that you're not going to lose it unless you do something stupid. I mean, I do see people in the gym, you might see them, they're doing 2 hours on the treadmill. Yes, that's ridiculous. That will probably cause a loss of muscle. But if you keep it, let's say, an hour or less, you're not going to lose any muscle unless, again, you're on a ketogenic diet and your glycogen depleted. And even that you could do something about. If you take about 5 to 10 grams of branched chain amino acids before you do the aerobics or before you work out, the body will burn up the branched chain amino acids. It will not touch the muscle. So there's an easy antidote to that anyway.
This is the kind of information that's really important for people to hear too. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, and they're not saying this on the sites. They're just giving misinformation. They're not telling people. The next one again relates to earlier, is about the calves. I mean, you still see articles and websites where they're telling people if you have weak calves, train them every day. Now, I have a personal stake in this because back 40 years ago, like I say, my calves were a little on the weak side, and I read that some of the top bodybuilders who had great calves, they were training them 6 days a week. And it said, the calves, this is what they said, the calves are such a tough muscle. You stand on them, you walk on them every day. They can take any amount of work. You can't overtrain them. If you want to improve your calves, you got to train them 6 days a week. I followed their advice. Me and my then training partner, we did 20 sets of calf exercises 6 days a week.
Oh,
20 sets. Not 20 sets, Richard. And remember, at the time, I was coincidentally, I was 20 years old at the time. I was at the peak of my physical powers. And I did this. And the great thing is, for the first 2 months, my calves actually seemed to grow. I was getting vascularity. I said, son of a bitch, it works. They were right. But something strange happened on the 3rd month. I was in a little home gym, I remember, in Marina Del Rey. It had mirrors all over, and I was wearing like sweatpants. And for some reason, I decided to look at my calves. I wanted to show this friend of mine. I said, hey, check out my calves, how much they've improved. And I rolled up my pants leg, and I looked in the mirror, and I said, hey, whoa, is this one of those fun mirrors, like these Coney Island mirrors? I said, what's going on here? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, look at the mirror. It looks like there's no calf there. What's going on? He said, and he looked down and he said, Jerry, you don't have any calf. You look like you have polio. And I looked, I said, son of a bitch. I said, what? My calves had atrophied down to where it looked like just bone was left.
Overtrained right into the ground, huh?
That's exactly. I never did this before or since with any other muscle. I literally burnt my calves away. Luckily, I went back to training them twice a week, which I've done ever since. And they eventually, they never got huge, but I gained some of the muscle back. But I took that as a learning experience. So again, that principle, number 4, anyone who tells you that you can train a muscle every day, walk away from them fast, they're lunatics. No human being can get away with that. Yeah, for a short time you can. And if you're taking a ton of steroids, you might be able to do it for a while. Eventually it will catch up with you. The next one is, this one again is a debatable issue. Is remember I was talking about those little tiny movements that people do in the gym. Well, there's a lot of people that write articles saying that you don't need to do a full when you do a curl, you can get just as much benefit if you do like a partial movement. And I don't believe that's correct. I think that you have to do full range movements if you want full, and it has to do with the way the muscle fibers line up. When you do a pre-stretch of exercise, you're basically lining up your muscle to get a much tighter contraction. I said, now doing short muscles, doing short movements, the muscle's never going to be fully contracted. So what happens is you get the same effect as if you were doing, remember isometric exercise where you would kind of just flex as hard as, let's say you would take a stationary bar and you would just do a curl where you couldn't move it, just flex as hard as you can.
I don't even hear about that anymore.
Yeah,
that was big back, the 60s, 70s, something?
Very, very big. Bob Hoffman, York, they pushed the hell out of it. But the thing is, see, what they found scientifically was when you do isometrics, you actually do get, if you're doing maximum effort, you do get stronger. But guess what? You get stronger in only the position you did it in. So that means that if you do a curl in, let's say, a 90-degree angle with all of your strength, you'll be stronger in the 90-degree angle, but you won't be strong at the start. You won't be strong at the... And you see how it relates to what I'm saying about partial reps. If you do a partial curl, you're going to be strong in that area, and maybe that part of the muscle might actually even grow, but you're not going to get complete growth. To get complete growth, you have to do a full movement. Now, let me quickly add that there's nothing wrong with some partial movements. Remember, you remember what Larry Scott used to call burns?
Oh,
remember
yeah.
Where you like
at the end of the set, yeah.
There you go, exactly. Larry Scott used to do his preacher curls, full reps, all the way down, all the way up, and then he would, when the muscle would fail, he'd literally go beyond failure, and he'd do these short reps until he couldn't hold the weight anymore. That's great. I'm all for that. As long as it's done at the end of the set, there's nothing wrong with that. So that's it. And I added one quick one, after I, thought about this, because this is another common thing that I have kind of a beef with, and that's this frequent admonition that you have to constantly change your workout routine. Again, some people will argue with me and they'll debate me. They say, no, you have to change your workout routine all the time. I mean, there's some top trainers, respected trainers in the world that tell people to change their entire workouts every 2 weeks. To me, that's absolutely absurd. It makes no sense to me. And I'll tell you why. Look at the anatomy and physiology of muscle. I mean, a bicep can only contract. It can do this, and it can do this. This is the bicep. And it can do this. It can raise your arm. That's the three movements a bicep can do. So, in other words, basically, any kind of curl affects the same nerve pathway to the muscle. It accepts the same thing. So, when you change your workout, Richard, I believe it's more for psychological reasons. If you're bored of doing the same type of, let's say, incline curls, you've been doing it for 5 months, and you want to do seated dumbbell curls or barbell curls or something like that, there's nothing wrong with that. But in other words, because you're fresher, the exercise is fresher, you will actually probably train harder. And yes, because you're training harder, you're putting more into the exercise, you will make more gains. But it's not from changing the exercise. It's the psychological effect of doing something new. You're putting more effort into it. But my point I'm trying to make is there's no actual scientific physical reason to constantly change your workout. If you still are enjoying your exercise, if you're still getting a full muscle pump, let me give you two names just to prove my point. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ronnie Coleman, two great Mr. Olympians. They never changed their workout. The whole time I knew Arnold, he did the same workout. He never changed a single. What he did, sometimes guys would come to town, other bodybuilders, and talk Arnold into trying a new exercise. I remember one year, a British bodybuilder named Frank Richards, I don't know if you remember him, he came to town and he taught. I was there. He talked Arnold into his favorite. He had a great lat spread, and Arnold asked him, he said, "Hey, how did you get your lats so what?" And Frank said, "Well, I'd like to do heavy one-arm dumbbell rows." Arnold wasn't doing that in his part of his lat routine, and he did it for a couple of weeks with Frank Richards. He added it to his back. He cut out one exercise and threw in the one-arm dumbbell rows, because he looked at this guy Frank, and Frank had a great back, so he tried it. That's what he did. He would try out certain exercises, but my point is he stuck to the same basic workout, and yet, contrary to what these trainers say, he continued. Arnold, you look at the photos, he changed year after year. He never looked the same. Same with Ronnie Coleman. Ronnie Coleman got bigger and bigger and bigger. I know people say, hey, Jerry, it's the steroids. No, I'm not talking about steroid. I'm talking about the training. If they needed to change workout routines, and if not changing workout routines held back their progress, these guys should not have changed, yet they did. So that's my point.
Jerry, thanks a lot for discussing the 5 myths of gaining muscle. I think our viewers are going to really benefit from this and not waste time in the gym. So Jerry, tell us about your monthly newsletter at appliedmetabolics.com.
My philosophy of this newsletter is I want to give like solid evidence-based information, no crap. It has no ads. I'm not associated with any supplement company, and I'm trying to focus on stuff that's not appearing all over the internet, kind of off the road stuff. I mean, I'm giving basic information for people that don't know this stuff, about protein and how to eat and how to prepare, nutritionally exercise for if you want to compete in bodybuilding or physique. I'm covering that stuff too. I'm also covering anti-aging, ergogenic aids, hormonal therapy, men, women, who are interested in testosterone, estrogen. I'm talking about ways to do that safely so you don't get any kind of medical problems. And the key point I'm trying to make here is that there's other publications, but they usually only cover one subject. Some of them cover nutrition, and they do it well. Don't get me wrong. They do it well. Some of them cover exercise, but I'm the only guy that's covering the waterfront. I mean, I cover about 10 different subjects.
Join us next week when Jerry Brainum will discuss the 5 principles of good nutrition. Have a good day.
Sponsored by Phoenix Performance Fitness Center. Mention my name, Richard Baldwin, for half off enrollment on any membership plan and 10% off any personal training package.